So if I just put a heavy gold circle covered in massive diamonds on the table right in front of you right now, your brain immediately categorizes it with a single word, right? Expensive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, market value.
Right. But if I take that exact same circle of gold and just place it on someone's head, your brain instantly shifts gears. It stops thinking about the price tag and it starts thinking about authority. It immediately tells you that the person wearing that circle is in charge.
It completely overrides our rational perception of an object. I mean, a piece of jewelry stops being just jewelry and transforms into a physical mechanism of control.
Which is crazy when you think about it. And to understand how human beings developed this, the psychological machinery, we are relying today on a really comprehensive Wikipedia overview detailing the concept of regalia.
Yeah, and the linguistic roots of the concept really hint at that necessity.
Hmm.
The word regalia, it comes from a Latin substantivation of the adjective regalis, meaning regal, which descends from rex, meaning king.
And welcome, by the way, to this custom-tailored deep dive. Our mission for you today is to look past all the shiny objects and the diamonds and understand how human beings have historically materialized, communicated, and honestly guarded the abstract concept of power.
Right, because in its earliest iterations, the term strictly denoted the elaborate formal dress and accessories of a sovereign. But as we're going to see, the scope of what constitutes regalia is vastly more complex than just, a heavy hat or a velvet cape.
We always just kind of assume kings and emperors wore crowns just to show off their bank accounts. But the historical sources reveal a landscape of authority that is much more desperate. They didn't wear these objects to brag.
No, not at all.
They wore them because if they didn't, their power would literally evaporate. So let's start with the root problem. Before a monarch ever puts on a crown, they have to possess something invisible. The source refers to this as abstract regalia.
Right, the invisible crown. These are the exclusive rights, prerogatives, and privileges held strictly by a sovereign. And the classic example given is the right to mint coins.
Because controlling the currency is like the ultimate abstract power, right?
Exactly. Specifically, it's the exclusive right to mint coins bearing your own effigy. You are forcing the entire economy to physically pass your face back and forth in order to trade.
That is such a wild concept.
It is. You are embedding your personal authority into the daily survival of every single citizen. I mean, from a baker buying flour to a general paying his soldiers, your face is in their hands.
It functions incredibly similarly to having super admin privileges on a computer network. The power isn't a tangible object you can hold. It's the exclusive, invisible authority to just alter the base code of the system.
That's a really good way to look at it.
But the vulnerability of that invisible power is glaring. If you're a medieval king and you have these super admin privileges, how do you make sure the vassals remember who is actually in charge when you aren't in the room? Especially when you're like 300 miles away in a different castle.
Well, that geographic and logistical vulnerability is exactly why abstract regalia was constantly under threat, especially in feudal societies where the central state lacked a massive standing army. The sovereign's power would just slowly erode over time.
Because people would just start ignoring the rules.
Pretty much. Lesser vassals or ambitious local lords would quietly start usurping these rights. They might start minting their own local currency, or they might monopolize a local resource that technically belonged to the crown.
Which brings up a remarkably specific example from the source material. The Upper Hertzwater Regale in Germany. From what I understand, this wasn't just about a king saying, I own this lake.
No, it was much more abstract than that. It was a royal prerogative dictating the use of water resources in a specific mountain range. The mechanics of it are fascinating because they demonstrate how incredibly granular abstract power can get.
So what did they actually claim to own?
The sovereign claimed exclusive rights over the kinetic energy of the moving water.
Wait, the kinetic energy?
Yes. If a local miner wanted to build a water wheel to pump out a mine shaft or crush ore, they couldn't just do it because the water happened to flow across their own private land.
Wow.
They were legally required to acknowledge that the force of the water belonged to the crown, and they had to be granted permission or pay a tax just to harness it.
So the king literally owned gravity and fluid dynamics in that specific zip code. That is unbelievable.
It's a massive flex of invisible power.
But this brings us directly back to the marketing problem, because abstract power requires physical marketing. If your power is an invisible legal claim over moving water, and you have dozens of wealthy nobles constantly trying to steal that claim, you have to find a way to make the invisible undeniable.
Right, you materialize the abstract rights. You wrap the human body in the wealth, the reach, and the craftsmanship of the state.
This is the origin point of wearable authority. Monarchs developed highly specific garments and accessories to visually separate themselves from the rest of humanity the second they entered a room.
Exactly. Because abstract rights like minting coins don't visually distinguish a ruler in a crowded room.
Yeah.
You need wearable authority.
I want to look closely at these garments because the source lists a bunch of items that sound like they belong in a fantasy novel. I mean, the ermine mantles make sense. Fur was obviously expensive. But then we have things like the cap of maintenance. What actually is a cap of maintenance, and why does it command authority?
So, a cap of maintenance is traditionally a ceremonial cap made of crimson velvet and lined with ermine.
Okay, sounds fancy.
It is, but its power isn't really in its material, it's in its spatial function. Historically, in British tradition, it is carried on a wand before the monarch during specific processions. Or it's worn by the monarch as a symbol of divine grace or favor.
Oh, so it's not always even on their head?
Right. It acts as an outrider. Before you even see the sovereign, you see the symbol of their maintained authority physically moving through the space.
It's an advanced warning system for power. I love that. And the regional variations are just as deliberate, right? In Muscovy, the Russian czars wore something called barmy. The source describes them as detachable silk collars covered in precious medallions.
Yeah, and the modular nature of the barmy is the key to understanding them. Russian court dress was incredibly heavy and layered. It was designed to project this massive, almost immobile stability.
So they weren't exactly doing jumping jacks in these things.
Far from it. By wearing this broad, detachable collar, encrusted with religious and dynastic iconography, the Tsar is literally wearing the history and divine sanction of the state, and it's resting heavily on their shoulders.
I see how layering yourself in heavy silk and gold shouts status. But status is sort of static, right? If we move from the garments that drape over the monarch down to the smaller accessories, the psychological message totally changes. A crown or a heavy collar says, I am above you. But a ring seems to communicate something fundamentally different.
It really does. A ring is rarely about sheer dominance. It is almost universally a symbol of a vow or a contract.
Like a wedding ring.
Precisely. In royal regalia, putting a ring on the monarch's finger symbolizes a literal marriage to the state. The sovereign is entering into a binding, reciprocal relationship with the realm itself.
Which brings up the Doge of the Republic of Venice, which is one of my favorite details in this whole deep dive. The source notes that the Doge used a ring to symbolize a marriage to the state's lifeblood, which was the sea.
Yes, the Adriatic Sea.
Right, but I'm trying to wrap my head around this practically. Wait, so is this just a metaphor, or did the Doge actually treat the ocean as a geopolitical spouse? Like, did he go out on a boat and toss a ring into the water?
He absolutely did. The ceremony is called the Sposabilio del Mare, the marriage of the sea. Every single Ascension Day, the Doge would sail out to the Adriatic on a spectacular state galley, and he'd drop a consecrated ring into the water.
You're kidding.
No, and he would declare Venice and the sea to be indissolubly one.
Okay, but did the average Venetian actually care, or was this just elite theater? Because throwing jewelry into saltwater doesn't exactly stop a foreign navy from invading your lagoon.
Well, it doesn't stop a navy, but it creates the domestic cohesion required to build one. For a republic built literally on top of a lagoon, relying on maritime trade, made the sea the most crucial partner the Venetian state had.
So it's a geopolitical wedding ceremony.
Exactly. Maritime trade and naval supremacy weren't just industries for them. They were the sole reasons Venice existed as a superpower.
Ah, I see.
By publicly marrying the sea, the government was anchoring its political legitimacy to the very forces of nature that kept the citizens fed and wealthy. It tells the populace, our control over these trade routes isn't just luck. It's a sacred, eternal union.
It creates a profound psychological buy-in. You are turning a simple piece of jewelry into a massive socio-political statement.
Right.
But let's take that concept objects that dictate action rather than just static status and look at what the sovereign actually holds in their hands. Because clothing wraps the monarch, but what they hold in their hands dictates how they are expected to act.
We're moving from garments of status to tools of action.
Yes, and the sheer variety of handheld regalia in the source is wild. Let's start with the French hand of justice. It's an ivory staff with a hand on top. I always found that image a bit eerie. Why a detached hand instead of just a standard royal scepter?
Well, the specific posture of the ivory hand is the crucial detail there. It is carved with two fingers extended, which mimics the traditional gesture of a clerical blessing.
Oh, so it's not a fist or something aggressive.
No, exactly. A standard sword or a heavy mace communicates martial power, the ability to kill or conquer.
Mhm.
But the hand of justice communicates the divine prerogative to judge, to heal, and to offer mercy.
It tells the public that the monarch holds the moral authority of the state, not just a monopoly on violence.
Which is a heavy burden of virtue to carry.
Totally. And then you have the Malay tradition, which utilizes the royal krizik. The source describes this as an asymmetrical dagger. But why does the blade need to be asymmetrical to project authority?
The kris is just a masterpiece of metallurgical and spiritual engineering. The wavy blade, which is known as the luck, is intentionally designed to represent a naga, or a serpent, in motion.
So it looks alive.
Yes. And furthermore, historically, these blades were often forged using meteoritic iron, incorporating rare nickel patterns.
Iron from space. That is undeniably cool.
Right. And in Malay and Indonesian cultures, a royal kris is not merely a weapon. It is believed to possess its own spirit or essence. When a ruler wields it, they aren't just holding a sharp piece of metal. They're acting as a conduit for ancestral authority and cosmic alignment.
So I'm seeing a real pattern here. The physical object is just a housing unit for a much larger philosophical idea.
Digag.
The French house divine judgment in an ivory hand, the Malay house ancestral spirits and meteoritic iron, and the Chinese, the source mentions the heirloom seal of the realm, which represented the mandate of heaven.
Right, the ultimate stamp of cosmic approval in Chinese history. A piece of jade that basically proved heaven itself endorsed your dynasty.
And then, shifting gears totally, the Celtic tradition houses dominion in a tiny bird.
Yes, the wren.
The source mentions the Celtic hunting of a wren, kept in a cage as part of royal tradition. Capturing a tiny bird seems so anticlimactic compared to space daggers.
It sounds that way, but capturing and parading a live wren, which is often considered the king of all birds in Celtic mythology despite its tiny size, it flips the standard dynamic of power.
How so?
Well, holding a massive sword shows you can defeat a large, slow enemy, but capturing a tiny, fragile, hypervigilant bird without crushing it, that demonstrates an absolute, inescapable dominion over even the most elusive aspects of the natural world.
It's precision power. I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah, it's about control, not brute force.
Which brings up a really fascinating contrast, because while some rulers show off their power by parading it around, others show off their power by completely hiding it. The source talks about Japan's 3 sacred treasures, the Sanshu no Jingi.
Oh yes, the sword, the jewel, and the mirror.
Right. The sword, Kusanagi, represents valor. The jewel, Yasakani no Magatama, represents benevolence. And the mirror, Yata no Kagami, represents wisdom. But the thing that fascinated me is that these treasures have been hidden from the public since the year 690.
Entirely hidden.
Yeah.
Seen only by the emperor and certain high-ranking priests.
It's like the ultimate ancient NDA. I mean, in a world where power is usually about showing off, the ultimate flex here is having power so sacred nobody's even allowed to look at it.
It's a brilliant psychological strategy. The mystery itself becomes the regalia.
But there's a massive problem with all of these objects we've talked about, visible or hidden. The ivory hand, the wavy dagger, the doge's ring, they only work if you're standing right next to the person holding them.
Spatial limitations.
Exactly. If you are a citizen standing at the absolute back of a massive plaza during a coronation, you can't see the nickel pattern in the kris. You definitely can't see the ring on a finger. The visual mechanism breaks down over distance.
And that limitation is the catalyst for the next major evolution of regalia, because physical objects can only be seen up close. To command a whole environment, to exert authority over thousands of people simultaneously, a sovereign must monopolize the senses themselves.
They have to dictate what people see from afar and what they hear.
Exactly. Which brings us to the monopolization of color and sound.
The ultimate VIP pass. Let's dig into the monopolization of color first, starting with Rome and Tyrian purple. The source brings this up, and I think today people hear purple and just imagine like a nice synthetic fabric dye.
Oh, it was anything but synthetic.
The reality of acquiring this color was brutal and industrially massive, wasn't it?
The production of Tyrian purple was an astonishing undertaking. The dye was extracted from the secretions of specific predatory sea snails in the Mediterranean. Snails. And it took tens of thousands of these rotting mollusks, processed in massive vats, just to yield enough dye to color a single garment.
Oh, wow. And I imagine rotting sea snails did not smell great.
It produced a notoriously horrendous stench. The workshops had to be kept outside the city limits. But the sheer economic cost of that supply chain made the color itself a physical manifestation of limitless wealth.
And because it was so obscenely expensive, the Roman imperial court legally reserved the color strictly for themselves.
Right.
But, an emperor can't be everywhere at once.
Right.
So they utilized this color to delegate their authority. They allowed members of the Senate to wear a specific purple stripe on their white togas. The source calls this a high aulic distinction, the purpuratus.
Put yourself in the Roman Forum for a second. It's crowded, it's chaotic, it's filled with thousands of citizens, merchants, soldiers. You do not have time to stop and ask for credentials.
No ID badges.
But if you see a man walking through the crowd wearing a toga with that distinct, violently expensive purple stripe, the color itself alters your behavior. You instantly know this individual has direct ties to the imperial center.
The color demands deference before a single word is even spoken. You are legally restricting a literal wavelength of light. And if we look at late imperial China, they did the exact same thing with the color yellow, but they tied it to the fundamental physics of the universe, right?
They did. Chinese cosmology was structured around the wuxing, or the five elements, and their corresponding colors, directions, and energies. Yellow was the color of Earth, but crucially, it represented the center of the universe.
So by legally reserving pure yellow garments exclusively for the emperor, they are weaving the emperor into the literal fabric of reality.
Exactly. It's not just a status symbol like, I have more money than you, so I wear yellow. It's an ontological statement. I am the geographic and spiritual axis upon which the entire cosmos spins.
Which is why peasants and even high-ranking noblemen were strictly forbidden from wearing robes made entirely of yellow.
They could use it sparingly in specific sanctioned contexts, but the pure monopolized block of yellow was the visual footprint of the Son of Heaven. It is sheer environmental control.
So you control the light, you control what people see, but human beings have eyelids, right? We can just look away. We cannot, however, close our ears. Which brings us to the monopolization of sound. Music is a binding legal parameter.
Audio regalia.
Yes. The source lists silver trumpets and the Nakara drum in Mewar, India. But the detail that completely stopped me in my tracks was the Malaysian Nobat Orchestra.
The ceremonial Nobat ensemble is one of the most striking examples of audio regalia in the world.
The text explicitly states that the playing of this orchestra is a formal requirement for a valid Malaysian coronation. I need to understand the mechanics of this.
Okay.
Because my modern brain hears orchestra at a coronation and thinks, oh, nice background music for the party. But if it's a formal legal requirement, does this mean if the band gets a flat tire and misses the ceremony, the coronation is legally void? Is the music actually functioning as a legal document?
That is exactly what it's doing. To really understand the Nobat, you have to completely discard the modern notion of music as entertainment.
Okay, discarding it.
In this specific ceremonial context, the sound produced by those specific drums, flutes, and gongs is the audio signature of the state itself. Think of it like a wax seal on a royal decree. A piece of paper with instructions on it is just a piece of paper until that wax seal validates it.
So the music is a sonic wax seal.
Precisely. The ritual requires the audio signature to bind the legal and spiritual transition of power. The actual reverberation of the drums in the air is the actualization of the coronation. Without the sound, the contract simply hasn't been signed.
Wow, that completely reframes every royal fanfare I've ever heard. It's not a song, it's an oral contract being broadcast into the physical space.
Sound itself becomes a parameter of statecraft.
And here's the terrifyingly effective thing about these visual and audio contracts. They work so incredibly well on human psychology that power structures outside of the monarchy immediately stole the playbook.
Oh, the impulse to materialize authority didn't die when the guillotine fell or when republics were formed. Not at all.
No. The source material outlines how these exact same rules of restricted dress and visual distinction survive today, all around you, in entirely non-royal contexts. It's what the source calls beyond the throne.
Think about modern republics. The Latin American presidential sash is a perfect example.
Right. It's a broad, brightly colored band of fabric worn across the chest. Conceptually, it serves the exact same distinguishing function as a heavy ermine mantle. It is a wearable mandate that visually separates the executive from the legislature and the citizenry.
And we see an even older continuation of this in academia.
Yes, university academic dress.
The heavy robes, the specific hoods, the academicals, these are direct descendants of medieval guild and clerical garments, and they are strictly regulated by the institution. You can't just buy a doctoral gown online and wear it to a commencement ceremony.
Well, I mean, you could, but people would be very upset.
Oh, right, because you have to earn the specific status that legally permits you to wear that specific arrangement of fabric and color.
You're literally putting on medieval regalia to prove to a room full of people that you survived the modern gauntlet of an engineering or law degree. It's the exact same psychological mechanism as the Roman purpuratus.
It really is. And the source also highlights how deeply this mechanism is woven into indigenous cultures today. Consider the traditional ceremonial dress worn by Native American peoples in the United States and First Nations peoples in Canada.
Specifically the regalia used in powwows and hoop dancing, right?
Yes.
And this is where the terminology is really crucial. It's deeply disrespectful to call these garments costumes, because a costume is something you put on to pretend to be someone else.
Exactly. A costume hides your identity. Indigenous regalia amplifies and authenticates identity. The beadwork, the feathers, the specific patterns, these aren't just decorative fashion choices.
Right.
They are physical manifestations of a person's heritage, their specific community standing, their family history, and their spiritual connection. It is a living, wearable record of respect and continuity.
Which proves just how universal this concept is for us as a species. Whether you are a newly elected president putting on a sash, a university student adjusting your graduation hood, or an indigenous dancer stepping into the powwow circle, you are participating in a direct continuation of the exact same human necessity that drove the creation of the kris or the Doge's ring.
We need abstract concepts like knowledge, heritage, or legal authority to be tangible. We need to be able to see the structure of our society.
We need the invisible to be made visible, because without it, we wouldn't know how to navigate each other. If we synthesize everything we've pulled from this deep dive today, it completely shatters the idea that regalia is just a collection of shiny, expensive museum pieces.
It really does.
Every ring, every ivory hand, every purple stripe, and every drumbeat is a highly engineered tool designed to solve a very specific, desperate problem. How do you prove you have power when power itself doesn't actually have a shape?
You build the architecture of authority out of whatever materials your culture values most, whether that is meteoritic iron, sea snail dye, or the force of a mountain river.
Which leaves me with a thought I really want you, the listener, to take with you and turn over in your own mind. We spent this entire time looking backward at how historical power monopolized physical resources. They controlled the dye, they hoarded the right to mint coins, they guarded the sacred swords. But the mechanics of power haven't changed, only the tools have.
The necessity for a marketing department for invisible power is still very much with us today.
Exactly. So what is the invisible regalia of our modern digital age? In a world where absolutely anyone can broadcast a thought to millions of people instantly, or digitally mint their own cryptocurrency from a laptop on their couch, what are the modern unspoken symbols we use right now to instantly signal to the room that we hold the super admin privileges? Is it algorithmic priority? Is it a verified checkmark? Is it the complete absence of a digital footprint? We expect power to look like a gold crown, but the true regalia of our time is almost certainly hiding in plain sight.